The world is changing extremely fast right now, in ways that can feel both exciting and overwhelming. So, how do we find balance in all of this? I'm Stephanie von Bismarck, activist, author, and digital educator. Welcome to my podcast, where each week I sit down with some of the world's best thinkers, trailblazers, and extraordinary people to find ways to help us all thrive and answer the big question, how do we manage? Tell me, have you ever found yourself in a room looking around thinking, how did I get here? Or worse, when are they going to realize I don't belong? If so, you're not alone. And you're not broken. Today's guest, Dr. Valerie Young, has spent decades helping people, from students to CEOs, understand a very common, very human experience, imposter syndrome. But here's the twist. It's not really a syndrome at all. In this episode, we unpack why high achievers often feel like frauds, how our culture quietly feeds those doubts, and what we can do to stop second-guessing the very things we're great at. Whether you identify as a perfectionist, a soloist, or you've been faking confidence in a sea of Zoom calls, this conversation is for you. Let's get into it with the brilliant Dr. Valerie Young. So, Dr. Valerie Young, thank you so much for joining me here today.
I am thrilled to be here, Stephanie.
So, the imposter syndrome, it's such a big topic. We were joking earlier, saying someone was asking me, "Are you ready?" And I said, "Well, I guess if I was referring to the imposter syndrome, I'd not feel ready." But how do you define an imposter syndrome?
Yeah, that is a great first question because there's so much misinformation. Now, everything is described as imposter syndrome. There was a couple of women who went to a nudist hotel, and they said they felt imposter syndrome walking through the lobby. And I said, no, you were naked in a hotel. That's not imposter syndrome.
Okay.
Or people think it just means, normal anxiety before a job interview or low self-esteem. And in fact, there's really three components that need to be present for imposter syndrome.
Okay.
One is this kind of belief, consciously or unconsciously, that I'm not as intelligent, capable, competent, qualified, talented as other people think I am. It could be professors, teachers, managers, clients, supervisors, etc. Number two is the person actually does have evidence of their accomplishments and their abilities, but they externalize it. They chalk them up to things like luck or timing. I was in the right place at the right time, computer error, or this sense that they just like me, right? As if likability wasn't a valid skill set, or I had a good connection who got me the job or what have you. And then the third piece is, what you're left with then is a fear of being found out. Those are the three pieces. Devalue your intelligence, competence, externalize your actual accomplishments, and then a fear of being found out.
So tell me a little bit about how it started for you. So when did you come across the imposter syndrome?
Yeah, this would have been in the early 1980s. I was a doctoral student at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst, and somebody brought in a paper by Dr. Pauline Clance and Dr. Suzanne Imes. Those are the two clinical psychologists who first coined the term imposter phenomenon. And she started reading from this journal article and describing how all these women, because they thought initially it was primarily women, felt like they were in over their heads. They were going to be found out. And I just sat there nodding my head like a bobblehead doll, like, oh my God, that's me. And when I looked around the room, all the other graduate students were nodding their head as well, which was stunning and remarkable because I knew their work. I knew they deserved to be there. So we started a little imposter support group. We started meeting after class, talking about our intellectual fraudulence, how we're fooling all of our professors. And at about the third week, Stephanie, I started to have this nagging sense that even though everyone else was saying they were an imposter, I knew I was the only real imposter. So they were like phony imposters in my mind, and I was the Beyonce of imposters.
Oh my God, okay.
So I became so fascinated with the topic that I changed the focus of my research and decided to look more broadly at women's internal barriers to occupational achievement. My degree is in education, and a lot of the work then was around therapy, one-on-one therapy with a psychologist or a therapist. So being in education, I took the results of my doctoral work and immediately turned it into an educational intervention, which is a very fancy way of saying I created a day-long workshop to use education to address imposter syndrome.
Okay, but I think that's important what you said earlier there, because you said imposter phenomenon versus syndrome. Because syndrome always sort of implies that it's an illness, but that's not really the case, is it?
No, not at all. Yeah, it's popularly known as imposter syndrome and actually started early in the 80s. It already was becoming referred to as imposter syndrome. I contributed a chapter to a book put out by the American Psychological Association. It's the first research-based book on imposter phenomenon. I'm the only non-academic and the only non-psychologist that they asked to contribute, which was a great honor, but also very stressful.
Okay.
At the end, they asked, just before they were going to go to print, they asked me if I would change my language and not use imposter syndrome and use imposter phenomenon. And I said no. And the reason I said no is that, syndrome in the world of psychology does suggest a diagnosis, right? Their frame of reference is the diagnostical statistical manual. The frame of reference for the rest of us is the dictionary. And the dictionary also describes syndrome as a set of thoughts, feelings, and behavior that constitute a pattern.
Yeah.
So I felt it would be disingenuous for me to kind of stray from a term that I and others had used responsibly for 4 decades. So I compromised and used IP/IS throughout my chapter, because I know syndrome is like nails on a chalkboard to people in psychology.
Okay. Where does it start? Does it start in childhood? Does it develop, or does everyone have it somewhere? What's the baseline there?
Yeah, for some people it does start in childhood. There are, family reasons, and I'm happy to give you examples of how that plays out. Often, a lot of parents in my audience are curious because they want to know, am I raising my kids to go up and experience imposter feelings? So there are family sources for some people, but not everyone resonates. There are situational sources like students as a segment of the population, college students, university students, graduate students, medical students, much more likely to have imposter feelings than the general population. People in certain occupations are more susceptible. People in creative fields, writing, acting, singing. That's why you see Tom Hanks and Kate Winslet and so many, very accomplished actors and writers, Maya Angelou, talking about imposter feelings. People in STEM fields and very information-dense, rapidly changing fields where no human could ever keep up, but you feel like you should. And sometimes organizational culture can also play a role in imposter. So there's no one source, although I do believe there is a core source, which I'm happy to talk about.
Okay, yeah, let's talk about it in a second. I actually read, and I don't know if it's true, but that the lowest sort of occurrence of imposter syndrome is like in construction and real estate and construction. That's probably because it's very hands-on, or why would that be?
Yeah, that makes sense because it's very concrete.
Yeah.
It's either right or wrong. You measure something, versus, those of us, whose work involves, thinking and planning and ideation and performing in one way or another. It's very different, less, more subjective standards, let's say.
Okay. I mean, I clearly in my life have felt, up until today, I sometimes walk into situations, or I'm about to hold a speech or something, where I think, why on earth is this me, or is there not someone else who would do this? And then there are sometimes people coming up and say, why would you say that? And you still feel like you don't belong. It's a weird thing. But I also know you said there are different types, right, of imposters. So there's the perfectionist and the soloist, and help me understand those 3.
Yeah, well, it really comes down to what I see as the core source. And let me add, Stephanie, I meant to say this before. There's also societal sources of imposter syndrome. If you belong to any group where there are stereotypes about competence or intelligence, that could be based on age, that could be based on gender, race, language, class, disability, you're going to be more susceptible to imposter feelings. If you are one of the few in your group, in your work environment, for example, or the first, like Michelle Obama being the first Black woman to be first lady, you're also more susceptible. You're the first, the few, the only. So there is that societal aspect. But the case that I make is if we somehow solved racism and sexism and ableism and ageism tomorrow, if all the situational and occupational and organizational sources vanish tomorrow, but we maintained our unrealistic, unsustainable expectations about what it means to be competent, then nothing would change. We would continue to have imposter feelings.
Okay.
And that's where those 5 types that you mentioned come in. The academic literature would talk about perfectionism, and there is a very strong link between perfectionism and imposter syndrome. So there's clear research on that. But in my work, I found not everyone resonated. I
Okay.
used to give people an exercise, and I still do, but it's basically I would have them fill in the blank. If I was really intelligent, capable, competent, I should, I'd never, or I'd always. So I'd never need any help. I'd always know the answer. I'd get it right the first time, whatever that might be.
Okay.
Then I would put them into groups, and they would pool all of their answers, and they would fill these flip charts and put them all around the room, and I used to collect them. So, I was doing a thematic kind of analysis. And I noticed that, again, a lot of people identify as perfectionists, I think especially women.
Yeah, I'm clearly there.
And also, people in any field where there's health and wellness and safety involved. But not everybody resonated, and that's why I came up with the other competence types. They get misidentified online as like archetypes or personalities, but they really define how we are understanding what it means to be competent and therefore measure our competence. So clearly, the perfectionists, they're gauging their competence on their ability to nail it every single time, right? 99 out of 100 would be considered a failure. Being on a podcast like this and mispronouncing a word or stumbling over a sentence or whatever it might be, it's like, oh my God, you'd be thrashing and turning at night over and over, right? Beating yourself up for making this, harmless little mistake. But other people, they might identify with the expert, which is the knowledge version of the perfectionist. So for that person, it's not so much around the quality of their work. It's not that that's not important, but what is primarily important to the expert is the quantity of knowledge and information that they know. And they often feel like they can never know enough. So there might be one more book to read, one more class to take, one more certification, one more degree, this kind of endless pursuit of the end of knowledge.
Okay.
The soloist, as it sounds, is the person who thinks they have to do it themselves. It was a team effort, group effort. If someone helped them, it doesn't count.
Okay.
The natural genius, they're defining competence based on ease and speed. They expect to be able to step in and pick things up very quickly, to crush it the first time, and just be kind of naturally, innately intelligent and have things be easy and effortless. And if they have to struggle to master something or get good over time, then they think they must be less competent. And the superhuman is the person who expects themselves to achieve at a very high level at all aspects of their roles at work. So big picture strategic planner and also detailed execution, leadership and scientific discovery. And sometimes outside of the home, not only perfect in everything you do at work, but also be the perfect parent, perfect partner, house has to look great, you have to look great. So those are the 5 competence types.
So naturally, I think women probably would be more prone because exactly that, the pressure from outside. You have to be great at work and a great mom and a great housewife and a great girlfriend, and everything has to be great these days.
Yeah.
So are women more inclined to have imposter syndrome?
Initially, that's what they thought, and then there was a lot of subsequent research that found it. There's different studies that say different things, but overall kind of relatively equal. But the most recent research that came out that looked at a compilation of many, many studies have found that it is indeed, and I'm not surprised, but often more prevalent amongst women.
Okay.
But I know men who, painfully experience imposter syndrome. I was speaking at the University of British Columbia, and I gave my talk. There's several hundred graduate students there, and this young man comes up to me, and he leans over and he says, "I only believed half of what you said." And I'm thinking, okay, I'll bite. I knew he wanted to tell me something.
Yeah.
Well, he had failed his qualifying exams at Oxford to get the PhD. So in his mind, that proved he must be an imposter. Because if he was really intelligent, capable, competent, clearly he would never fail. Was kind of his thinking.
Okay. So that is a perfect to my next question, because who are those who suffer less or not at all? What are they doing differently? What makes them different?
Yeah, it's been found that up to 82% of people have had these feelings at one time or another. The statistic often thrown around based on nothing really is like 70% of people have had these feelings at one time or another. But let's say it's 70%. I often wonder, what is up with the other 30?
Yeah.
Right? If we're the majority, right? Maybe they're the freaks. Right? Yeah. Well, I think part of that 30 have a whole different issue going on, irrational self-confidence syndrome. Their belief in their knowledge and skills far exceeds their actual knowledge and skills. Then there's another group who are just that arrogant, kind of proverbial smartest guy in the room. But there is a minority within that minority who we do want to understand, people who are genuinely humble, but has never had imposter feelings. And these are people who I describe as humble realists. And that's who I think we want to start modeling and learning from and becoming.
Okay, who's that humble realist? I want to become a humble realist. What do I do?
Yeah, there's really just 3 ways that they are different because they're no more intelligent, capable, competent, talented. It's just in the exact same situation where you and I might have an imposter moment, they are thinking different thoughts, which is like great news because it just means you have to learn to think like them. It's not about a motivational pep talk, right? You've got this and you can do it and you deserve to be here.
Yeah.
Which is not going to move the needle in any lasting way. If all it took was a pep talk, imposter syndrome would have gone away a long time ago.
Yeah, that's right.
Humble realists think differently in 3 very specific areas. They have a realistic understanding of competence. They have a healthy response to failure, mistakes, setbacks, and constructive feedback, which of course we experience as criticism.
Mm-hmm.
And they understand that a certain amount of fear and self-doubt is just part of the achievement journey. So they don't conflate confidence and competence, feeling if I was really competent, I'd feel confident 24/7. My response to that is like, good luck with that.
Okay.
We're going to have moments of confidence, we're going to have moments of fear, and that's normal.
So is there something, was if I look back at myself, it was like, okay, I would probably, with age, and if you develop yourself and you sort of also work on yourself, you sort of get more experience. So you become a little more aware of what you're capable of and start believing yourself a little more, especially as a woman, perhaps. But what about the young people? How do we educate them? Is there something that can be done from an educational standpoint?
Yeah, absolutely. Carol Dweck wrote a wonderful book called Mindset.
Yeah.
And she talks about an exercise around the family dinner table. The typical dinner time conversation with school-age children at the end of the day is, what did you learn in school today? To which most children say, nothing, right? Or I don't remember, which is what we said, by the way.
Yeah.
And Dweck said, wouldn't it be more useful to every day, once a week, say, let's all go around the table and talk about something that was difficult or challenging or we failed at and what we like how we dealt with it and what we learned from it. I'll start. So to model resiliency.
Okay.
Because very often, you might be the kid who came home with all A's and 1 B, and your parents' response was, what's that B doing there?
Yeah, exactly what happened.
Right. So what did you learn? That the only thing was acceptable was perfection. And for kids, praise is like oxygen.
Yeah.
Other children might have come home with excellent grades and got no praise at all.
Mm-hmm.
And there's many reasons. Well, first of all, let me back up. There's many reasons why a parent might push a child to excel academically and be very hard on them. It may be if you have an immigrant experience, there's often an understanding that education is a path to success or maybe even survival for the family. So
Better
they're going to push
somehow.
you. Right, exactly. Or they might have been 2 high-achieving parents or 1 high-achieving parent. They want you to follow in their footsteps and so on. Very often, at least I can speak to the U.S., Black parents might instill in children for very good legitimate reasons that you have to be better. You have to be better to be seen as equal to. Other kids might come home with very, very good grades and get no praise at all. And there's many reasons why a parent might not praise a child for academic achievement. It may be they didn't get it growing up, so they don't know how to give it. Maybe it's cultural. Maybe it's just expected. Or maybe there was other children in the family who were struggling academically, and they didn't want to single out the kid who got labeled as the quote-unquote smart one.
Yeah.
But again, none of those reasons really matter when you're a child because praise is like oxygen. And then some kids got a little too much oxygen, right? Okay. Where they were told everything they did was remarkable.
Yeah.
And then they get very dependent on getting a lot of positive feedback. I sat next to this young woman at a conference, and she said whenever she sends an email out at work, she's like waiting for this positive feedback about her email. And I'm pretty direct, so I said, well, that's a problem.
Oh, yeah.
People are busy, right? They don't have time to praise your every email. But if you became dependent on that as a child, then that can be problematic.
Okay, and so I love that conversation around the dinner table what was challenging and the parent starts.
Yeah.
Because it's really, it's really modeling that you also struggle and not everything is always perfect, and that's okay.
Absolutely. It's about teachable moments and resilience.
Yeah.
I've got a great job just speaking on imposter syndrome because if I screw up this podcast, I've got a teachable moment.
Yes.
Right? I could just
Yes.
stop and go, you know what? We're all human. Like no one said, I'm not listening to this podcast one more second when she stumbled over that word, right? When you're a humble realist, which I've gradually become,
Mhm.
you're able to put things into perspective. Like, we all make mistakes. We all stumble. We see critical feedback as information to get better, not over-personalize it and let it be more about who we are as a person. So to be able to convey that, like you have the right to make a mistake, have an off day, fail, and regroup, and like, okay, study harder. How are you going to pass the next test if you failed your test today in third grade? And those are the resiliency opportunities we have to teach kids.
There's so many lessons, and some people spend an entire life getting better at certain things, right? So I know that you're doing these workshops with people. So what are the core elements that people go out? How long do they last? Like your workshops when you're doing that with, I don't know.
It depends on what the client is looking for. It could be an hour, keynote. It could be a 90-minute interactive. It could be 2 hours.
And what in your experience has worked the best, where people really come back to you afterwards and said, man, that tip was just so great. And I really...
Yeah, I think it's the opportunity. Well, it's a few things. It's one, I help them to normalize imposter syndrome by understanding what I refer to as the perfectly good reasons why you might feel like an imposter. Some of the things I mentioned before: family, situational factors, occupational, societal, organizational, so that the next time you have a normal imposter moment, you can do less personalizing and more contextualizing. Let me give you an example. I did a podcast for the British Medical Journal. There was a medical student on there, and I don't know what they call it in the UK, but in the US, she'd be like a third-year resident in her practice. And they were lamenting the lack of positive feedback that they get. You work so hard, and because medicine really is a culture of shaming.
Yeah.
Right? Shaming you for not knowing the answer. I mean, it makes sense, right? Your life or death. So the best you can do on your final medical exam in the UK is no concern. That's the grade. We have no concern about you, which is very British, by the way. So, the point that I made to them is, yeah, that's hard, right? You're working so hard, you're getting nothing positive back. But on the other hand, you didn't know that was the culture you were signing up for when you went into medicine, but that's the culture you're in. Now that you know that, you can do less personalizing, make it less about you, and more contextualizing, like this is normal in the environment that I'm in. I think that alone can help. But also what helps, I help people to kind of reframe competence, but also very much help them to think about, how is this showing up in the form of a pattern in your life?
Yeah.
Because there are behaviors associated with imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
It's not just an interesting self-help topic, and that's how it impacts organizations. Because employees who experience imposter syndrome are more likely to do things like hold back, not ask questions when they're confused, not raise their hand when they have an idea, not go for more challenging opportunities or assignments, like stay in a job they've long outgrown because it's safer there.
Yeah.
Right? If you put yourself out there, you could be discovered as a quote-unquote imposter.
Yeah.
Another strategy is kind of, again, unconsciously, but is chronic procrastination.
Okay.
When I was supposed to be working on my dissertation to become Dr. Valerie Young, I had the cleanest house in Northampton, Massachusetts. And it has never been that clean since, but I would do anything other than, try to sit down and work on this big research project, which I felt incapable of.
Yeah.
How procrastination protects us. There was a young student who really wanted this coveted internship. She was a university student. To get it, she had to complete a very lengthy application process. She had 6 months to do it. Let's say it's due June 30th. When do you think she starts it?
Yeah, June 1st.
June 29th. Right?
Okay.
Got the day. Yeah, I knew what you meant there. The day before.
Okay, wow.
Right? She gets it in on time, but she doesn't get the internship. How procrastination protects us is we can say to ourselves, well, I'm disappointed, but I'm not surprised. Because it didn't reflect your best effort. But the rub is, if she had been accepted, she wouldn't have felt deserving. She would have felt like, whew, like fooled them again. And sadly, for some people, that turns into never starting or finishing the book, the painting, the business plan, the degree. Because if something's always in progress, no one can judge you. For other people, it might be self-sabotage, might be alcohol or substance abuse, or showing up late chronically, right, to job interviews and things. And for someone else, it might be overworking, over-preparing.
Okay.
Not out of the requirements of the job. We all have to work hard to be successful, but out of the sense that for other people it's easy. But to cover up for my supposed ineptness, I have to work harder.
I thought it was really interesting how you said reframing competence. How do I reframe my competence?
You look at it from the vantage point of a humble realist.
Okay, how do I do that?
Yeah, which goes back to your pattern. So you step back and you think, what are the situations where imposter feelings are likely to come up for me?
Yeah.
Is it when I'm in a room with people who are more senior than me or more experienced than me? Is it when I'm in a spotlight somehow or I have to make a presentation? Is it when my work is being critiqued? Is it when I'm thinking about taking that next step and taking on a challenge or when I fail? So what is the situation? What are the negative voices in my head start saying? What do I feel and what am I typically doing? Once you get some clarity on your pattern, and that would include how you're looking at competence, you want to think about how would somebody who is a humble realist, how would they respond differently in this exact same situation? What would they be thinking?
Okay.
What would they be feeling?
And would you write that down? Or
Yes, absolutely. Well, let me back up because first I would have them look at their pattern, and then look at their coping mechanisms. Like the last question is, and what do I typically do? And I think for most of us, we're least aware of the behaviors because they're often unconscious. And that's where I introduce them to the different coping and protecting strategies of procrastination, I call it flying under the radar, the kind of holding back procrastination. And I invite them to look at what is this pattern? How does this pattern serve you? If we weren't getting something out of the pattern, Stephanie, we would have given it up a long time ago. It's there to protect us in some way.
Yeah.
So I invite them to think about, what does this pattern help me avoid?
Yeah.
What does this pattern help protect me from? And what does this pattern help me get? If I procrastinate, I get time to do stuff I'd rather do. If I work ridiculously hard all the time, I'm probably going to be successful. It's a hard pattern to break because hard work brings success. Flying under the radar, for example, holding back, it helps me avoid criticism or failure or disappointing myself or it protects me from scrutiny. So first I understand, how does it serve me? The next question is, at what cost? Because you never get something for nothing. And this model, by the way, comes from a former professor when I was in graduate school, Gerald Weinstein, who's 95 now and still alive, and he'll be thrilled when I tell him I'm still talking about his work. But the next question is, what will happen if you never change this pattern? What is the cost? What opportunities and experiences might you miss out on? Once you know, this is what I'm getting, this is what it's costing me, now I can make a conscious decision. Before it was an unconscious pattern. I can decide I'm going to keep my lousy pattern because it's working for me, or you decide the cost is too high. If the cost is too high, now you want to think about, okay, what would I do if I could embrace the mindset of a humble realist? What would I rather think? What would I rather feel, and what would I rather do? And then it's a matter of kind of practicing that over and over, because you're not going to believe the new thoughts initially. You're going to believe the old thoughts.
Yeah, and it takes there's always this, whatever, it takes 30 days or 3 months or whatever to internalize things.
Exactly. So you have to act like you believe the new thoughts, even though you don't. Like, how would somebody who is humble but does not feel like an imposter, how would they act differently? And just practice acting that way.
So fake it till you make it, being a humble realist a little bit?
Yeah, it's kind of like just keep going regardless. People often wait until they feel confident.
Yeah.
Right? When I feel more confident, then I'll start my podcast. When I feel more confident, I'll write my book, or I'll go for the promotion, or whatever it might be. And that's not how it works. Like, feelings are the last to change.
Yeah.
You have to change your thoughts first, even though you don't believe the new thoughts. Then change your behaviors to act like you believe the new thoughts. And over time, the feelings will catch up.
From my life, certainly, and many others I know as well, you have this notion of if you just wait until you get better, this waiting for that moment to be perfectly prepared for whatever, the podcast, the new job. But the reality is that's just never going to happen. Because if you wait, it's just, you're just losing. The cost is you're probably never going to have it.
Absolutely. And people who are the most highly degreed are more likely to have imposter feelings.
Yeah.
Right? So you think, I get this PhD, and now I don't feel like an imposter. Somebody said to me, this is ridiculous. I have a PhD. I shouldn't feel like an imposter. And I said, no, you feel like an imposter because you have a PhD. Like, now people look at you a certain way. There's certain expectations. You must be smart.
Yeah. I mean, I know that your book was also about looking behind women's eyes. Is there something you tell women differently than you would tell men?
Not very much. I don't like the title of my book at all. I did not want that title. The agent loved it. My publisher loved it.
You're not the first one who says that, by the way, on the show.
I have a whole chapter that explains why that women would not resonate. It's called The Secret Thoughts of Successful Women. I think they thought it was clever, and what do I know, right? I'm not in publishing, so I let them go with it. And so many women have said to me, your book was sitting on my desk, and someone walked in and said, "Oh, what are your secret thoughts?" And they said, "Oh, I didn't realize they were talking about me." Most women don't resonate with quote-unquote successful women. They think it's like a CEO of a company or someone just in a very kind of senior kind of position. If I walked into a bookstore and I saw The Secret Thoughts of Successful Women, I would think, I wonder what those successful women think. And I wouldn't be that curious. I wouldn't be curious enough to even buy the book.
Yeah.
I would have called it How to Feel as Bright and Capable as Everyone Thinks You Are.
Oh,
something more.
I love that one.
Me too. I like books that just say what it is, right?
Yeah, I love that one. I would have bought that book.
I did. Random House let me do some revisions. I wanted to take certain American politicians' names out of the book. People might be able to guess which one I'm talking about, which was in there well before anything to do with
what's happening now.
When one was in real estate.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to update some things. And I also wanted to, make it more broadly for men. So we couldn't change the title because of the ISBN in Amazon. So they did add The Secret Thoughts of Successful Women and Men.
Okay.
I would say one difference is, and it's a generalization, right? You can't say all women this and all women that. As a generalization, I think, first of all, women have more expectations, more things to feel like an imposter about.
Yeah.
There's more pressure to be the perfect parent, physically,
exactly.
to look good and et cetera. So I think that's the case for women. But I also find women are more likely to over-personalize even constructive feedback.
Okay.
And to let it mean more about who we are as a person. So if someone says that report was inadequate and we hear,
I'm inadequate. Yeah.
I think we have this like trick scale, and on the trick scale, only the negative evidence counts.
Yes.
So back to your question about, kind of what can you do? A humble realist, they seek out feedback. It's like tennis, right? Do you want a tennis coach who's going to say, well, Stephanie's holding her racket wrong, but I don't want to say anything because I don't want to hurt her feelings.
Yeah.
Or do you want somebody who's going to give you information that's going to make you better?
Yeah.
So humble realist seeks it out. Even if someone says you did a great job, they're going to say, thank you so much. What's one thing I could have done even better? So they're not wounded by constructive feedback.
Okay.
So I think that is a major difference, I think, with women.
Okay. You were also talking about the big organizations. You help big organizations. How do you tackle that as a or even a medium-sized organizations? And how do you help them become or make it better for their workforce?
Yeah, I mean, why an organization would even be incentivized to address imposter syndrome? Because again, it's not just an interesting self-help topic.
Yeah.
It can affect productivity.
Yeah.
Innovation, health and wellness, retention, advancement. So there is a financial cost. Humble realist thinking can be learned on an individual level, but can also be supported within the organizational level. Is this an organization that says, oh, we're interested in innovation and we welcome great ideas and experimentation up until you get it wrong or it fails and then you're penalized?
Yeah.
Are you working for somebody who is a perfectionist themselves?
Yeah.
And expects perfectionism and nitpicks about, small things? Are they giving feedback in a way that is helpful for people? I was speaking at NASA, and this young woman came up to me later, an engineer, and she said, gosh, you're so right. I just had my performance review, and my boss told me 5 areas where I excelled. And I said, well, that's great. And she said, yeah. And so I asked, is there any place I could improve? And I said, that's wonderful. That's exactly what you should be asking. And she said, yes, but then he criticized me and I was depressed for weeks. I said, do you mind if I ask what the criticism was?
Yeah.
And she said, yes, he told me I could have delegated more on my last project.
Oh, wow.
I said, that wasn't criticism. That was information. So often managers will say, like, how can I give feedback to someone? And I invite them to take it up to the next level and say, how are we informing people about the value of constructive feedback so that they're also doing the inner work to be able to reach out and to accept it and to see it
Yes.
as a gift?
Yeah, that's so important. I guess a lot of people listening now is like, if I had a big company, I would send you in right away, and try and help it make it better.
Well, think about, or, when you start a new job. I used to work at a Fortune 100 company, and it's overwhelming, right? You're new names and acronyms and history and systems and on top of your job, and you're
Yeah,
just on complete overwhelm.
yeah,
And so you often think, oh my God, I'm not prepared. I shouldn't be here. I don't know what I'm doing. Which, guess what? You don't know what you're doing because you've been thrown in. You're on complete overload. So as a humble realist, you would give yourself that grace to say, I'm going to feel off base for the first
mm,
month, the first 3 months, and this is normal. It's not a reflection of my ability. I'm just absorbing massive amounts of information. What the organization can do is set it up, say, oh, welcome, we're so glad you're here. It's your first day, Stephanie. Here's a little booklet or an app or whatever it might be. As you come up with questions throughout the day, put it here. And then we're going to meet with you, every other day and go through all of your questions to kind of normalize the experience of having tons of questions and being almost afraid often of even asking them.
that's absolutely great. I'm thinking of my older daughter who's starting a job at a very sort of worldwide known consultancy firm, and they're having a very long, what they call onboarding process now. And she's done some stuff before where she's literally just was thrown in. And then, of course, this feeling of overwhelm was there, and then you feel you have to manage, but you don't really know how. And then, of course, you feel like you don't belong very fast. But just talking to her, it was interesting because she was absolutely less stressed. Because although what's going to be expected of her is going to be a lot, she was thinking, no, they're giving me time to get to know the company, the processes. So as you speak of it, I remember that. And it's like she was much more relaxed this time than when she was just thrown into something and she was just overwhelmed. But now, and it's probably going to be even more demanding,
Right.
but they're giving him more time. So I think that's a great start.
That's great. Instead of having this unrealistic expectation.
Yeah.
I mean, even small things like posters. I mean, years ago, I spoke at Facebook headquarters. I walked in the lobby. There was a poster on imposter syndrome. They had a print shop right on campus where any employee anytime could go make a poster and put it up.
Okay.
So they had Black Lives Matter posters well before the marches and everything, several years before that. But there was one poster with a quote by Ernest Hemingway. Now, there's some salty language, so I just want to warn your
Yeah,
listeners.
we love that.
And it said the first draft of anything is shit.
Yeah.
Which is very much the culture of Facebook, of just like try things, throw things up against the wall. Apple is much more of a secretive perfectionist culture, but so even things like that, which can convey how we're thinking about trying things, failing, can also be helpful.
Wow, I love that. How well have you managed becoming a humble realist yourself? Have you managed that task?
Oddly, I have. And
I love
I
that.
wouldn't have said this, for many, many years. I would have said, which I think initially the goal is not to necessarily, quote unquote, cure imposter syndrome. It's be able to have the tools and the insight to talk yourself down more quickly.
Okay.
Right, when you're having that imposter moment. But I think, Stephanie, having heard myself say this enough, now let me be clear. It's not that I'm not disappointed. I did a 6-minute TED Talk. I sent in they had like a contest of sorts. I sent in a 1-minute video. They chose 10 people out of I don't know how many videos. I went to New York. I'm at TED headquarters with TED speakers in the audience. Big lights, Chris Anderson, all the big TED people are there. It was the most stressful thing I'd ever done.
Oh, I imagine.
And I know my topic very well, but not in the order I was doing it, and I kept timing it and practicing for hours and hours and hours and hours. And you know what it's like when you walk off a stage and you're like, crushed it, right? Nailed it.
Yeah.
I wanted that feeling, and I didn't have it. I actually lost my train of thought in the middle of that, and thank God I got back on track. But it was incredibly stressful. So I was telling someone that story, and she said, oh, so you felt like an imposter. I said, no. I didn't think I fooled anyone. I didn't think I was more intelligent, capable, competent, than I am. And I didn't feel like I was going to be found out, right? I wasn't externalizing my accomplishments. I said, I was disappointed.
Okay.
And it's okay
Okay.
to be disappointed. So now I'm really of the mindset that if you knew you had the right as a human to make a mistake, have an off day, not know the answer, struggle to master something, ask for help, there would literally be nothing to feel like an imposter about.
So important. Is there something you do on a daily basis that helps you manage your day any better? Like a ritual or something?
I don't know that I have a ritual. I start out with a nice morning walk with my dog. So I guess that's a
See?
nice, relaxing way to kind of start the day.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's lovely. I love
Yes.
that. I do
Yeah.
that too. Yeah. Thank you so much, Valerie, for coming here today. I could talk with you for hours. Keep on doing that important work. And thank you for being here today and taking your time.
Thank you. I am thrilled to be here.
Well, thank you. Dr. Valerie Young, never an imposter. I hope you'll go away from that conversation feeling more able to own every space you step into. Thank you so much to Valerie for her wisdom and advice. You can find out more about her and her work in the show notes. And do click follow whilst you're there for many more conversations with leading experts. I hope to see you again on How Do We Manage?